Yeah, so that's just going to be that's literally just as simple as once the so the ACA basically creates a credit. They're absorbing part of the costs of of the medical program by providing the insurance and paying off a certain portion of it. And it looks like on average it's like 80%. It's a big piece so that they're subsidized and people can afford the insurance. And what it's going to come down to is as people fall off of the insurance, because once it goes from being 200 to being 900, 1,000, I could not afford my insurance at 1,000. I don't make that much. So once you've gotten to a point where you have to ditch your insurance, it comes into two problems. Yeah, people with no insurance are having to go to the hospital. Hospitals are having to absorb costs. People are coming in for emergency visits for things that they would have been going for regular care. Again, that was part of the point of the ACA. But then you have the other side of that, which is most people have insurance and never use it, carry it for years, for decades, and have no major use for our health insurance until you're much older. And then you've paid in so much money by then that you're balancing out. You're very well balancing out, unless you had a catastrophic injury. You're balancing out what you paid in over those years when you were healthy. We're creating a situation now where healthy people are going to have to drop out because they can't afford it. And the people who stay in are going to be the people who are so sick that they can't, they have to do without other things to maintain that $1,000 because they can't afford to pay the $4,000 for their medications. So then you have people who are paying in less and taking out way more. And the only way that you pass on your costs to your consumer. That's the way we've always done it in this capitalist society. And the insurance companies are going to start lowering benefits and raising rates, and the system will eventually have to eat itself, or it'll go over to just a very small number of Americans who actually have insurance, and then we have to change all the rules we work by about what is even the function of a hospital if the only people who can use it are the well-heeled, well-moneyed. Let's say that healed sounds wrong. Well, I wouldn't. Okay, so I wouldn't say that. I don't know your income. I mean, I know your background, but I don't know how you've leveraged that in terms of money. I don't know how you manage your finances. But I don't think you even are the person we're looking at for who isn't paying enough. Everyone is leveraging the system as best they can, and sadly, the point is, the more money you make, the more leverage you have, instead of the other way around. The people who have less are given more credit, more excuse, allowed to keep a bit more of their money. Um, there was an article I was reading, and I unfortunately I can't cite it, but they were effectively talking about the tax base, the tax system that Trump knocked aside in his first term would have left people like Elon Musk paying an additional $2 billion every year. And that's not just Elon Musk; that's people like him. So Elon would have paid 2 billion. Uh, um, uh, the people who are making their money through Apple, through Amazon, the Bezoses of the world, the Bezoses of America anyway, those guys would have been paying billions in additional funds into the system. And this is part of that same, I've had this argument with people I know who own small businesses. We make the mistake of thinking that when we say all businesses should be paying 80% in taxes, and then they should be cutting that down by making jobs, by spending more on their materials, by spending money on facilities. We give you credit for that stuff so that you end up paying less in taxes, but we tax you heavily coming out of the gate. And most small business owners seem to think we're talking about them when we're not. We're talking about the businesses that have 50, 60, 100, 1,000 employees who are making millions of dollars a year. And if we were taxing them, they would have to cut that by actually paying the number one, because everybody's number one expense is their employees. They would have to put even more of that money into their employees to get it out of their tax base. And once it was in their employees' pocket, their employees are going to have to spend it. They're going to save some of it, but they're going to start eating out. They're going to start buying cars. They're going to start going on vacations. They're going to start paying for their children to go to school. They're going to start buying nicer clothes. And when you own that small business, you are the primary beneficiary of that spending. So your little clothing shop, your little bakery, your little restaurant is going to get more customers. And more customers means more money. And more money for you means you can hire more people, you can expand your business, which means now there's a bunch more employees who are lined up in your business, and maybe you can afford to pay them better as opposed to just increasing the number. That is as close as you get to trickle down. You take it or you make it so that they have to spend it to keep it, as opposed to what we have now, which is we give them tax cuts out the wazoo and they offshore that money to the tune of trillions of dollars sitting in offshore banks that they're not doing anything with it. It doesn't hurt them to have it. It doesn't hurt them to spend it. It's just extra money that's been taken out of circulation. Okay, so that's actually an angle I hadn't considered, and that's a really interesting point. Um, and I think the flaw is in the fact that we are, even when things, even a year ago, when things were financially better than the decline we're starting to see now. Actually, that would have just been 8 months ago, 10 months ago, uh, before Trump took office. We're dealing with a system that is still lying to people and pointing fingers and giving them reasons to, illogical reasons, lies, to think that someone is trying to take what's theirs and reduce, devolve their quality of life as Americans. When what we're really seeing is that, as you said, the people at the top are just taking more and more and more, and they're blaming it on other people. And a big chunk of our country, a solid third, really, are buying that lie, hook, line, and sinker. I can't even begin to imagine. No, we can begin to imagine. And we've created a generation of people who are more than happy to buy into these lies, because we had a generation before that who were told your racism, your homophobia, your nationalism is less than acceptable. And it would be best if you stayed quiet about that sort of stuff. And then we stripped away the education that allowed the rest of society to understand why those people needed to keep quiet, why the things they believed were illogical or just untrue. They had been lied to and they had swallowed that lie. Um, we stripped away the ability to think, to look at the facts and place them. And while we were busy doing that, we moved away from a government that fought with itself, but understood the entire point was to come to an accord, which generally meant nobody got what they wanted, but everybody got something. And that ended with Reagan. That ended with Reagan. I can honestly remember, uh, civics classes where we talked about debates that the Republicans and the Democrats were having about various different, issues. And we got to see the people who led our government arguing with each other and finding middle ground and being civil about it. Not it wasn't like it is. What back then it wasn't like it is now. You 100% disagreed with the other side, but you understood you had to give them something. Even if they were somewhat of a minority, you had to give them something in order to bring the entire package together. And you didn't get what you wanted necessarily, and they definitely didn't get what they wanted, but everybody moved forward a little bit. We don't do that anymore. We just try to find ways to bury the other side, particularly from the conservative edge, which is, it is a culture war. And now that the government is involved in it, we went for a long time where it was like, the people can fight, but the government has a job. And now we have, to speak to what we're here for. We have a government that is passing rules that are designed to push black male soldiers out of the military over hygiene rules that we've understood for 40 years were necessary. You know, uh, okay, so it's a shaving profile. It basically says that all soldiers should be clean shaven, and for I think the number is like it's somewhere between 20 and 40% of black soldiers. It's a high number, but I can't remember what it is. Daily shaving is a problem. It's not just black soldiers, but it is mostly black soldiers. Um, we get razor bumps. There's a medical name for it, but it basically comes from when you shave, the hairs, rather than growing out of your skin, will curl back on themselves because we have kinky hair. They'll curl back on themselves and they create infections. And I have the same issue. I don't know how well the camera shows it. I have this issue. Most of the men in my family have this issue. The men in my family who have been in the military have needed that profile so that they did not have to shave every day. And the end result of that is that they have to I don't think in my dad's generation they waxed their faces. That's what I do. But my dad and my uncles had to pluck. They had to get needles and tweezers and dig the hairs out from under the skin so that they were on the outside, and then pluck them completely, uh, uh, and wait for them to grow back in again, and then do it all over again. And depending on how much of your face was involved, you would have to spend more time. In my case, it's mostly on my neck. My dad had that issue down his cheeks and on his neck. I think only one of my uncles didn't have that problem, but that is a lot of black soldiers. They cannot shave every day because it will create an ongoing and worsening infection from those hairs and from having cut through the skin to get down to the hair, or from every time you're trying to run the razor over extremely uneven skin and you're tearing it open and you're bleeding and you're having to care for those injuries and they're getting infected. They're not healing flat. Um, yeah, it's just an ongoing, and it is a literal natural problem, and it is nobody's fault. It's just the way it is. So by taking away that shaving profile, you are pushing those soldiers out of the military. You can't, if you have that problem, you can't be a U.S. soldier. So yeah, so Hegseth is trying to push out black soldiers with that, because it serves no other purpose. It serves no other purpose. Um, but at the same time, we're making rules. We're still arguing about them trying to push into the national defense authorization. They're trying to push in things like uh, soldiers who have children who are trans or have gender issues, that their care won't be paid for by our government's uh, benefits that they already receive. Uh, and that's their children. We're not talking about the soldiers themselves. That's their children. And we already know we're not going to be paying for the soldiers, because if you identify yourself as a transgender soldier, you're out of the military. So it's not covering you either. Where they're putting a ban on transgender bathrooms. So, I mean, I suppose you could still have, male, female, and family, but they'd find a way to complain about that too. You're not allowed to have pride flags in military settings. If the DoD is in charge of it, you can't have a pride flag, um, which is a very specific attack. Um, there are all kinds of political and social standards that we use. Go ahead. Right. Right. I don't think it's okay. So that is a necessary step, but I don't think it is the primary necessary step. If we created a situation, Cynthia Leonard, who was in one of our early episodes, she's a big fan of basic income. The idea that everybody should be given a living wage. If you need more, it's on you to go out and get it. So if every, depending on, the number would have to change depending on where you lived in the country, because you couldn't just say everybody gets $2,000, because $2,000 in Arkansas is a completely different ballgame than $2,000 in California, or $2,000 in New York, or $2,000 in Georgia, or $2,000 in Mississippi. Bless you. We need a basic, to do what he's talking about. You need to have basic income. You need to know that no one is so poor that they cannot find a place to live. I'm not talking about whether or not you have a drug addiction issue and you choose to be out in the street, or your brain is so fried at this point that you can't put enough logic together to move into a home. And we're not talking about mental illness where um, you cannot be near people, or the responsibility of a home is troublesome, or if we put you in if we put you in housing, you're going to start destroying it because of the issues that come with your mental illness. um, but if you could put together a situation where you're giving people basic income to meet their needs with, then it is just a hop, skip, and a jump to, and here is medical care for everybody, and that medical care is going to include mental health care, and then it becomes a very simple step to creating education that is tailored to the needs of the individual and society, so that people who, if you need a greater education, it's available. And if you decide you don't want to go to school anymore, there's something you could do. And because of the nature of a basic income, if you decide you don't want to work at all, then that's fine. You don't have to have a job, but you'll have to make do with what you're given, because there's no more. So he's got to, he's on the right path there. For me, the biggest piece of that is we have to get back to a place where we understand that everyone's rights are the same as everyone else's rights. Um, the fact that we literally have politics predicated on this person or that person is less deserving of the benefits of this society than I am, even though they're a member of this society, is insane to me. And you would think, almost 200 years after the Civil War, well, not 100, 150 years after the Civil War, little, give and take, give or take, um, you think we would be able to see that and balance it out, but we are still fighting the battle of I need to be better than somebody. And I still feel like, what? That's an unfortunate thought. But yeah. Okay, so and I was having that argument just a few days ago. It was actually part of the Star Trek Star Wars, who is better, Star Trek or Star Wars. It was part of that argument. Um, and the idea that if you gave everybody a universal income, the vast majority of people are not just going to go back to their house, sit down in front of the computer, and never move again. The vast majority of people freed from a requirement to be at a job 40 hours a week will probably be at a job 60 hours a week, but they're going to be doing something they want to do as opposed to doing something they were forced to do. There are a ton of people who would like to be in a garden right now, who would like to be in a field, who would like to be in the forest cleaning it up, who would like to be tending to nearby herds, who would like to be helping out the animals at the shelter. Um, there are plenty of tasks they could put their energy toward. They could go back to school and get higher degrees to be even more able to do what they do. And there's always going to be stuff that can't be done by the machine. As you said, those tomatoes were rock hard. We could go back to a higher quality of tomato that had to be picked by hand and simply pay those people a logical wage to go out in those fields and work those hard hours. Um, which isn't, and that's to say, it becomes a skilled job to be in the field picking those fruits. Um, and the longer you're out there doing it, the more money you're making. And then that balances out against the people who went to school for a higher education, who are doing more complex work or a different kind of complex work, and they're being paid a higher wage. Everybody's work is always going to have some balance of value. And if the thing you want to do all day long doesn't have any particular value to anybody but you, then that's fine. You're still not going to starve to death. And by that standard, we're not going to have to worry about arresting you or dealing with your illnesses that you can't afford to pay for, or the fact that you don't have decent food or medical care, and we spend even more money on your emergent issues because we don't get to deal with them until they're chronic and they're dang near killing you. Uh, we're not going to have to drag you off the street because you don't have any place else to go. It was different 300 years ago when most of this area was just covered with trees and everybody lived in their own separate little tribe, because even then you weren't just laying around with nothing to do. You had things to do for yourself and for your community. We are now industrialized and we can afford to take care of even more people. And oddly, that circle is exactly what I've been describing. Then it circles back around to a community where everybody's individual best interest and ability can be harnessed by the community. But this wasn't intended to be about um, universal income. Right, right, right. And the answer to that, yeah, in New York, yes, Well, okay. So the problem with Osborne isn't that he's against capitalism. It's that he still has that issue of he needs somebody to blame for the problem. And even though he's saying it's the rich guys that are messing us up, he still turns around and says we need that wall built. Illegal immigrants are, why are we giving them benefits and treating them like, human beings who need some level of decency applied to them? He's still in that box. He's still effectively a Trumper. And in the in the same way that there was in the article that you were talking about, there was a point where he was talking about if Mr. Trump needs someone to help him build that wall, I'm a real handy guy. Okay, that's fantastic, but you are agreeing to support a guy who is denying swaths of Americans their basic civil rights, who is denying constitutional rights, human rights to anyone who is brown enough that he can detect a difference. Um, then that falls in the category of that's the reason he doesn't have a tan. That's the reason he's orange. He doesn't want to be brown. He doesn't want to be seen as having spent a healthy amount of time in the sun. He has to be, he can't be the pale basement dwelling creature that he is, but he can't be something else. He's settled on orange because it doesn't make him look like anything else. Um, he's he's in his little box, and Osborne is joining him there in terms of we cannot treat everyone equally, and that is again that is the root of the evil. Too many of us do not look at other people and see other human beings. They look at other people and see a problem. We have to get to a point where we okay, okay. Okay, okay, yeah, but we already had that system. That's the system we're dismantling right now. If we really if we well it the main okay, and the main reason it didn't function is because we had a high influx of people and a low number of people to process all that paperwork. We've always had a problem with the number of judges who were going to work people through the system, and we've made that problem worse now. And the fact that we're arresting people at their citizenship hearings, at their green card hearings, at their visa hearings, um, that's yeah, it's just underlining that the entire goal is to get these people out, even though we have no rational replacement for the functions that they provide. And it has always been true that if we literally wanted to stop illegal immigration, all we have to do is turn off the spigot of jobs. And the easiest way to turn off the spigot of jobs is that when you go to the chicken plant and you find 50 illegal workers, you find the company that hired them. They will fucking stop hiring illegal aliens if there is a penalty that they have to pay. The company that hired all those illegal aliens, when those 50 get put on a bus and shipped away, they're going to hire 50 more to replace them. They might actually hire more than 50 because now they got to make up for a shortfall in the production caused by the loss of those last 50 employees. It's always been a monetary issue, and it's always going to be a monetary issue until we take that factor out of it and level that part of the playing field. The people with the money want the labor. They want the labor cheap, and we allow them to get away with that, with making that labor cheap. If we force, and again, that's what I was saying before, if we force them, your tax rate is now 80%. The only way to get that down is to improve your facilities, improve your product, uh, and improve and take out what you're paying to your employees. The first thing that would happen is that everybody would get a raise and everybody would get better benefits. I think you would, and I think you would for the same reason that we still have people working in mines. We still have people working in the oil fields. Those guys are well paid for the risks they take. And let's be clear, those are incredibly risky jobs. Those are dangerous jobs. They are the work itself is a detriment to your health. And you may manage to take care of your family very well, but there are very strong odds that you're going to do permanent damage to your body that is only going to worsen as you age, assuming you don't die in some sort of a horrific industrial accident. If you increase the pay, you will find Americans willing to take up that slack. And maybe well, and you're assuming that the food prices would go up. The what so we have this never ending and ongoing issue of we have lots of farmland in this country that goes unused. We sell huge amounts of our produce outside the country. If you just focus that in, if you so much of your crop has to be, or not so much of your crop individually, but so much of our crop as a nation has to be maintained domestically to meet our needs. Everything in excess of that, we don't care what you do with it. We're not going to pay you to not plant. We're not going to pay you to plant it and then burrow it under. We're going to pay you, as a matter of fact, we're not going to need to pay you, because if you are utilizing your land, there is a market for it. And if there's not a market, you shouldn't be farming. So that is, yeah, yeah. We have a system running right now where we just put a lot of money into making things not happen. Um, and there's got to be logical reasons for that. And I think the problem is that the reason was logical once upon a time, and it just no longer is. But we still have the same rules, and we haven't, and we have the same rules because somebody's making entirely too much money off of the rule being there. That one farmer who is making $30 million a year because he owns 40 different farms, has a bunch of people working under him. He can afford to peel off 5 million of that and pay it to lobbyists and make sure the governor is getting greased, and the senator from his area and the representative from his area are getting their share, and their job is to make sure that the rules that give him all that money stay in place so that they get their cut of all that money. That part of the system, we got to find a way to burn that out. If you are working in government, that is a temporary and not particularly well-paying job, and you definitely won't be using. We need to just make lobbying illegal. It's just legalized bribery. We need to cut it out 100%. Lobbying needs to end, and a lot of things would improve if we stopped lobbying. And then we have to deal with the insider trading and the everybody's committee is investing in the field in which they specifically have to set legislation in place. That's no. Mm-hmm. And it's the stupidest damn thing I've ever fucking heard. Corporations do not vote, and corporations are not people. I can't send a corporation to prison. They are not a thinking, living entity with the same, deserving of the same political access that I have as a human being. Even me, my one vote, they are not my equal. A whole corporation is not my equal and should not be. Everyone in that corporation already has a say. Okay, and here's the problem for me. You can't come up with the message and the slogan because the message and the slogan don't fix the problem. The problem isn't that there is a lack of a message. The problem is that we acknowledge that we need Title IX to protect people from sexual abuse, from sexism, from bullying for those exact same reasons, but we somehow cannot get the Women's Rights Act ratified and recognize that women are the equal of every woman is the equal of every man. We are constantly drawing lines that make somebody less than. And this is where I started this. Until we start drawing lines that say everyone's rights are at this line. This is the line. There's nobody down here. If you have a heartbeat, a brain, this is where your line is. This is not, it's not down here, it's not down here, it's not down here. Everyone's line, exactly the same. If I have autonomy in my body, you have autonomy in your body. If I can vote, you can vote. And there's a difference between saying I can vote because I'm a citizen and you can't vote because you're not a citizen. But that is not the same difference as I live 2 miles west of the train tracks and you live 2 miles east of the train tracks. Nobody west of the train tracks is a decent human being and deserves to be able to have their say. The things that they want or the things that stupid people want, we're going to leave all the voting to the people on the other side of the tracks. We need to get that needs to be done away with. Needs to end. Well, I mean, and there's nothing wrong with that being the policy because you have to say what you want to get the people on your side. I'm just saying there's nobody out there delivering that message. Well, excuse me. There is nobody in the Republican or Democratic Party whose message is 100% equality, human rights for all humans, period, end of statement. Oh yeah, yeah. AOC, Buttigieg. Um, Cannot think of his name, but there's that other young man from Texas who's part of their legislature. Very rational, very straightforward. Yeah, white guy. He looks a lot like Colin. Yeah, he looks a lot like Colin Yost. Colin Jost. His name, he can pronounce it. Him and his lovely wife. Uh, yeah, yeah. There are plenty of people who espouse that standard, but they're not in control, and they are being kept out of control. We have shoved them as far from the table as we can keep them without killing. I would still vote for Bernie. I would still vote for Buttigieg. I would still vote for AOC. Um, uh, uh, there are a lot of those people that should be in the White House, in the cabinet, in the government at a federal level, um, looking out for everyone. I mean, they did a great job when they were just looking out for their region. They're doing even better when they're looking out for the country. Um, and I don't know Tellerico. I don't know his political affiliation, but I'm not saying I mean, most of that list is effectively Democrats. There are plenty of people out there who are Republicans who understand what I just said and believe in what I just said. I don't know them because I don't know them. Uh, yeah, I don't know why I don't know them. I don't know why they're not speaking out. I don't know why they haven't been able to get elevated. I assume it is the party not wanting that message out so they cannot advance within that party because there are still people, there's a reason that Cortez doesn't move forward, that Bernie is constantly being held back. Bernie came up in a different age. He has attained a great deal of power. If he were starting today with those same beliefs, he would be in the exact same toilet as Cortez.